Hello and welcome to Speaking Spirit, where we talk about all things spiritual. Your host, John Moore, is a shamanic practitioner and spiritual teacher. And now, here's John.
Hey everybody, I'm going to say good morning, although I have no idea what time of day you're listening to this. It is morning where I am. It's a beautiful morning, and it's the day after the full moon. We had lots of great full moon energy to celebrate this weekend. I am absolutely thrilled today to bring a guest to you, so you don't have to just listen to my voice. Pardon me if I cough a little bit. I promise I'm not sick. I just having an allergy situation. It is beginning to be spring here. So my guest today is Rebecca Quave, and I am trying to remember when I met Rebecca, and it was at a seminar in Boston, and I remember that my children were infants, so it has to have been close to 14 years ago, so it's been a while. So my guest Rebecca Quave supports people around the world to rediscover and fully embody the love they are. Rebecca is a catalyst of transformation and expansion of consciousness. Her natural gift of activating you to your highest truth creates profound shifts quickly and easily. And after spending years caught up in the exhausting hamster wheel of striving for more, Rebecca began to, unraveling who she thought she was, only to discover the indescribable, life-transforming love that was already there. Rebecca is here to lovingly guide and support you through your own unique process of awakening and transformation. And with that, good morning, Rebecca. It's so nice to see you.
Good morning. It is. It's wonderful to be here.
And Rebecca, you are also on I'm on the East Coast. You're also on the East Coast. So at least we're talking in the same time zone today, though we're, 1,000 miles apart or something along those lines.
Yeah, we've sort of covered the north-south axis of the East Coast, haven't we?
Yes.
Sort of from one extreme to the other.
I have to work on some West Coast guests and then some overseas at some point to bring on. Today we're going to talk about finding purpose, finding your true purpose, and we're also going to talk about love, and love maybe from a perspective that some people are not, maybe not familiar with, right? Because we have this, to me, word love in English, which is super generic, and we use it for all kinds of things. And I know, I've heard, I don't know this to be true, but I've heard that in, languages like Persian, there are 85 different words for love, right? And I know that, in other languages, there are many different words for love. So I might say, for example, I love my children, and I might also say I love a hamburger, but I don't love them in the same way, I hope, right? I'm not gonna,
right, exactly.
Right? So when I ask this question, I think of the old song, What is Love, right? From the Night at the Roxbury, right? Yeah. What is love? Baby, don't hurt. I can't sing more than that or I'm going to get in copyright trouble. So when we're talking about love, how do you describe it? How do you describe love? How do you talk about love from your sort of spiritual perspective of what that is?
So anytime you hear me use the word love, I'm not referring to the emotion love in any of its degrees, right? So not about a person that you love and it's this intense emotional feeling, or that, feeling of, like you said, of extreme like of a hamburger or a pizza or whatever.
Right.
Right. So because the emotion love has an opposite. It can just as easily turn to dislike or hate, anything on that spectrum. What I'm referring to is an energy that has no opposite, is boundless, is all-encompassing, and is all-embracing. And the way it acts is just in accordance with its nature. So what the love I'm referring to does is it just loves, right? It's not capable of anything else. So it always embraces, and it's a gateway to really everything that everyone is looking for. And this love, people have such an innate yearning for that's so incredibly strong that they spend their lives searching for anything that they think is going to be sort of a watered down facsimile of that, right? And then are disappointed. But that yearning is so strong, it goes beyond even safety or survival, right? Because if someone feels that they're so disconnected from having access to that level of what I'm describing as love, they'll take their own lives. Mm-hmm. Right? So right. The pain of believing that you are separate from that love, the pain of believing that you don't have access to that love, even though it's all pervasive, is intense and is what really is at the root of so many experiences for people.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I know I'm not a proponent or a strong believer in the concepts of the traditional concepts of heaven and hell. But there is a description from somewhere, it's an old one, of hell as being separate from the light or the love of God, right? As being separated. And that is the ultimate torture, right? The ultimate state of human suffering is feeling separate from that all-pervasive love. And that really, that sort of rung true for me in a way in my own life where I discovered like I was my own jailer. I was my own captain.
Oh yeah.
I was the one who was creating those impediments, not consciously necessarily. But my belief system.
Oh, right. Of course. No one would do it consciously.
Right.
No one would say,
right.
oh, all pervasive, all embracing, boundless love with no opposite. Oh, I'll just throw that away.
Let me just chuck that away and live in my ego forever and suffer, because of that. And there's another word, in my take, it might be synonymous, or you might have a different take on it, or you might say you don't care about that word at all. But there's another word I like a whole lot, which is beingness, which for me, when I'm practicing and when I'm trying to connect, I'm resting in this state of beingness, which is a little bit beyond description, but I will say that it is. It's a sense of stillness that has kind of an ultimate peace, but also that interconnectedness. And I'm wondering if you see a connection between words are so limited, right?
They are.
It's hard to describe these huge all-encompassing concepts in words. But I wonder if you see a connection between the concept of beingness and this love. I don't know. How would you I realize I'm going off on like 9 million tangents here, but how would you?
No, that's all right.
When you describe love, would you describe it as a field? Would you describe it as, or maybe it's beyond description? I don't know.
Well, ultimately it is all beyond description, but if we're going to use words and point in that direction, then there's absolutely a relationship, because what you're describing as beingness, that's a great word to point to and represent that just innate presence, that isness of you existing as the totality of what you are. And so love points to an aspect of that, right? Because love is inherently what you are. Since there's, excuse me, since there's no way to separate from it.
Yeah, I mean, right. You could not.
There's believing that you're separate from it, which of course brings what you described, that intense agony,
Right. And another word sort of, and this comes from my cosmology, for lack of a better term, of my shamanic practice. But we talk about the spirit as this undying, unborn, incorruptible piece of ourselves that is never affected by external circumstances. It's never affected by our beliefs. It's never affected by our thoughts or injuries that happen to our body or any of those things. And again, like that idea to me is hard to describe. I have to,
because our whole language and our whole mind and all of that is set up on opposites, right? It's set up in duality. So when you try to describe something that is changeless, that is beyond duality, then you'll run out of words quick.
Right. It's hard. Language is so limited, but it's the tool we have. And there's the old Zen saying that, Bruce Lee made sort of famous that, you can look at a finger pointing at the moon, but you're not looking at the moon, right? And when you focus on the finger, you're focusing on a pointer, but you're not having the experience of gazing at the moon. And
exactly.
And I think that's sort of describing the limitations of symbols, right? Symbols are powerful. Symbols are, representational, but they're just representational. They're in their that's, that is the ultimate limit, is that they aren't the experience. Even the word experience doesn't seem quite right here.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a podcast in which I get completely tongue-tied and I'm able to talk about the topic because it's deep and complex. But that's, I think I'm grasping what you're talking about, and I hope that it's becoming sort of clear. And so in your work with people and when you're teaching and that sort of thing, you're really trying to get people to identify with that love that they are at their core, or is it something different? How would you describe that?
Well, it's a process of exploration, right? The key component is curiosity. So what I see so often is people launch themselves into a spiritual path it's really coming from the same places of expectation and judgment and manipulation that they were doing before, right? So it becomes, I have this new thing that's going to make me feel better, and so I'm going to do it so I can feel better. And eventually you're going to run into a certain limitation with that, right? There's going to be a wall that you hit. Whereas when you're exploring from a place of curiosity, just for the sake of it, just because it's so alluring to you, and you leave behind the expectations about what your experience should be, or what you think this will produce, or what you think you'll find on the other side, that's when there's now finally enough open space and this fertile ground for what was there always, right? That changelessness to show itself to you, right? So the process that people go through, and you described it as reconnecting, and that's, again, we're limited with words, right? But it's really just them becoming re-aware of what's present. So it's a lot of questioning and exploring in a really open-ended way, because the point of the questions isn't an answer. It's you sort of letting yourself be pulled into the experience of that revealing itself.
I really love that.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I really love that, because I am, my nature is super curious. Like I have probably donated a library full of books at some point that I personally owned, and probably own thousands more that are taking up a good portion of my home. I'm always wanting to explore and sort of learn. And particularly my spiritual bent is about, going inside and learning and sort of learning what's there. And over this weekend, I taught an intro to shamanism class, which is always fun. It's always fun, really, to get new people to come in. And one of the things I like about shamanism is that it's a path of individual revelation, right? So I may be your teacher because I'm teaching you a technique, but I can't tell you what that means for you, what you get from that. I can't put my meaning and interpretation on top of that. And so I know, because I've taught intro quite a lot, people they're going to journey, they're going to have experiences, and they're going to come back and say, this happened. Is that okay? I'm like,
all right.
Of course. It's not for me to judge if that's okay. Did you explore it with an open mind? Did it have a profound effect on you? And if it did, then fantastic. And if it didn't, fantastic.
Well, and the flip side of that is people overemphasizing that, peak experience or something, and letting their mind really latch onto it. And right, everybody thinks that they're after the what they expect is going to be instant gratification of the whole heavens opening and trumpets, and everybody's kind of chasing that. And that's really not, number one, it's not how it has to go for you. Everybody has their own way. So the second thing is that even if it happens that way in this one moment, this one flash of everything,
right,
I can say from experience, it can then take years to integrate that, right? So there's never this instant way that people are expecting. And the emphasis the experiences don't really matter at the end of the day. An experience is still just an experience. What matters is, and you're the only one that knows this, is what's going on internally in you. And are you comfortable in your own skin, in your world, in your experience? Or is there something else going on? Is there that push toward, it needs to be something else, right? That's at the end of the day what matters.
Right. Yeah, I think the author Adyashanti, who's a meditation teacher and pretty popular author, I wish I could remember the name of the book. I think he has a book that sort of talks exactly about that, about having these peak meditation experiences, even being on sort of the edge of what they consider enlightenment, and then kind of losing it for a while, right? And going back, because you're not always going to have...
Well, what seems like losing it, because what's happening is it's this integration that has to happen. And that's what people tend to overlook, right? There's this expectation that you're going to hit some, line that you cross that is the ultimate. Right. And then that's how you're going to feel all the time, is the way you felt in the throes of that experience. And that's just not what it's about.
Right. You're going to get a certificate to hang on your wall.
Exactly.
Fully enlightened now.
Certified. Right. Certified. Whatever.
We're going to give you we're going to give you a colored belt to wear and a hat.
But you see how it is. Look at all of our systems and how they're set up to support that.
Absolutely.
Because the mind really is comforted by that, right? The ego wants to be told, this is your identity, and because this is your identity, you're now enough. And yet, no matter what that identity is, you'll never actually feel like it's enough. Not really.
For sure. And I think part of that is this sort of Western patriarchal cultural pyramid scheme, right? Where I have to have, there has to be somebody at the top of the food chain, and, you work your way
to tell everyone else what's what. And then maybe you could be that person. Yeah.
Right. If you just work harder, just send more money, put it in the envelope, and you will be that person.
Right. You too will experience these blessings.
Right. Someday. It's interesting. And I get questions sometimes from students, because, my path is, shamanism, when I practice in a group, I frequently the only male in the room. It's a very matriarchal system. It's very, more feminine than traditional spiritual systems in my view anyway. And I get questions sometimes. They're like, so what are the levels of, what are I'm like, there's no levels. You just practice. You go, train with a teacher here and train with a teacher there. And you just practice. There's no levels. There's no,
exactly.
There's not a body stamping, certificates or anything like that. Although I think, I do think some people have tried. I think there's some organizations out there. It's just not my thing, and power to anybody in whatever they're doing, but it's just not my thing. I can't hack that. It's not my thing.
Yeah, no, I get it. Same thing. I don't, I operate outside of any particular, tradition, method, whatever you would want to call it, because it's really about what everyone is, and you don't need any particular structure for that. You can, and anything can be helpful to some degree, right up until it's not.
Sure.
If you were climbing a ladder to a second floor balcony, it wouldn't really matter if you had a rope ladder, steel ladder, wooden ladder, any of that. The question is, would you just keep climbing up and down the ladder for the sake of it because you got so attached to the ladder? Or would you actually stand on the balcony and experience whatever was there that you were hoping the ladder was going to give you this assist, to reach?
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people just climbing up and down ladders, really attached and married to the ladders.
Uh-huh. Right. I years ago, that's a great analogy. And I had a meditation teacher who told me, meditation is like noticing you have a thorn in your finger, and then you pick another thorn off the rose bush and pry the original thorn out of your finger. Once the thorn's out of your finger, you throw the second thorn away, right? That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take, once you're here, you don't
just keep poking yourself.
You don't just keep jabbing yourself with the thorn. You throw that away. You don't need it anymore. It's but it is a lesson about attachment to methodology or that sort of thing. And I think that's an interesting segue into the other thing that we're going to talk about today, which is about finding your purpose, right? And really, if you're stuck in sort of rigid systems, or you're doing things habitually without really kind of examining what you're doing and not giving yourself the freedom to explore and the freedom to experience different things, how could you possibly be following your true path or your true will, right? How would you get it?
Right.
How would you get in touch with that?
And currently, in this moment in the world, there's tons of people who are about to be stepping forward in things that most people don't understand and won't understand. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it takes that curiosity and then that deep clarity that's on a solid foundation of being rooted in that peace and in that love that you are, to be willing to step forward with it, no matter what the noise around it is, right? Regardless of anybody saying, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that means, right? Because that's the voices that go on in their head at first as well when they come to me. They oftentimes have kind of a sneaking suspicion about what some of their gifts are or what they're like being asked to step forward with are. But then there's all this other noise about, what is that? How does that even look? How does that even show up? But we're at such a tipping point and such a transition point that there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be really valuable stuff that comes forward that people haven't ever heard of, that doesn't make sense to people. And that's the beauty of it, right? Is that it is completely new. So when people try to, like pick their purpose from like a list of, we've got doctor, lawyer, firefighter, and like, well, which one is it? Then they're going to come up empty handed because it's stuff that's not already on the list.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, please describe yourself using a label that I'm comfortable with, that I have experience with, right? Please cram yourself into a shoebox that I can put on my shelf somewhere so I can understand what it is about you. I actually frequently have difficulty answering the question, which is a really common one. What do you do?
Right. That's what I was about to say is like, see, me on a plane next to someone and they ask, what do you do? It's a different answer every time because it's just going to come out in accordance with what they can understand, like what their frame of reference is.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you ever just want to make something up? Well, I went through,
years and years ago, gosh, how old is my son now? 20. So, over 20 years ago, before things, opened up for me and changed for me, I would put, just because I was a little bit of a smart ass as well, when I had to fill out forms, because I was just at that time, I had been a scientist before. I was in genetics research, but then I was staying home with him. And when I had to fill out forms, I would put lactation engineer.
There you go.
Because that's what I felt I did most. I spent so much time doing was nursing him 24/7. So lactation engineer. And I would just watch people's faces when they read the form.
Yeah. It's, it's in unharmful ways. It's fun to mess with people sometimes. Right.
There's exactly no harm in that, writing lactation engineer.
Right. And maybe you gave somebody a chuckle or a thought at some point. And,
maybe
that's totally fine. So if I were somebody who, I feel like I'm somebody who I'm maybe approaching some understanding of what I would consider my purpose. Like I'm almost 50 and I'm getting to the point where stuff that doesn't make sense to me at all, and I don't feel like it is coming from that place of love, is falling by the wayside. Or if I pursue it, obstacles, the universe or whoever places obstacles in my path to say, you can go down this route.
So you're getting more aware of that natural alignment.
Right. So there's this alignment. Is there, if somebody were like, gosh, I don't even know, I have no idea what my purpose is. And I realize, like, I'm not asking you to condense everything you do with everyone into, the remaining minutes of this podcast, but where would somebody begin? Where would somebody sort of start to suss out, I just feel like I'm stuck. I feel like there has to be more in life. I feel like I'm not, I'm not operating from that place of love identification. How would one begin?
Yeah. So first of all, with what you said of operating from that place of love identification, that's really the primary purpose, right? That everyone has, is to experience what it is to, within this place of duality and physicality, to be aware of that simultaneously, right? That's what, on a fundamental level, everyone's come here to have the opportunity to experience. So, because inherently we all know what it's like to be 1,000% aware of that all the time. That's what our true being is all about, right?
Right.
So, however, to condense yourself into this extreme, duality and limitation and density of the physical world as it exists currently, and be aware of that, is then this really new, unique, amazing experience, isn't it? So, it brings a whole new depth to our understanding of the flavor of that love, right? When we've now experienced it, even through the limitation, even through the density, even through the physicality. So just to kind of throw that out there, that's really everyone's purpose. Then what gets layered on top of that, the way that so everyone, how do I say and speak to this? So simultaneously, there's this universality to everything, right? And this oneness to everything, and that includes everybody. Mm-hmm. And then superimposed on that is everyone is this completely unique facet of this, kaleidoscope. And or the way I often describe it is like a symphony. You have this one sort of music that's coming out of the symphony that's incredibly beautiful, but you have all different instruments. Mm-hmm. And even amongst those instruments, the instruments are playing different notes, right? And that's what makes the symphony beautiful. So even though there is this oneness because it's producing this one music, it sounds different and we appreciate it more than we do if we hear one flute playing one note and never changing, right?
Right.
So on top of that overall purpose that I just described, everyone is then here to bring their unique singular note through their particular instrument. And if they don't, then it's not this incredible symphony, right? It's going to be dull. It's going to be off key. Something's going to be missing. So as far as them starting to connect with that, I'm just getting back to your original question, sorry, is start at the center of their heart, because they do know. There's nobody who doesn't know. There's nobody who doesn't have answers for themselves. It's just a matter of, are you listening? Are you aware? Are you letting it come through? Are you willing to connect with it? And does it scare you? Mm-hmm. Right? And do you have lots of other noise, piled up around it that now needs to be resolved? Because in the center of your heart, there's something that you've all along been drawn to, and you've pushed it away and forgotten it.
I would absolutely concur with that, and I love your analogy of the symphony. I'm going to steal that. I promise I will give you credit for it when I do. Okay. I will remember to say where I got it from. I'm going to use that. And the other thing you mentioned, which I think might be helpful to touch on too, is the noise that creeps up around this, right? And that plays really well on, talking about this symphony. There is a lot of noise, and the noise can be our own noise. We create our own noise, right, from our past experiences, from the culture that we impress with, and then there's an awful lot of noise that comes from sort of externally as well. And I'm thinking of a client,
which is ultimately then all the same noise.
Yes, yeah, it's
because
just
even the external noise is the only thing, bothersome or not to you about the external noise, is if you have a reaction to it.
Yeah.
Right. So to two different people, the same external noise, one of them is not even going to notice it, and the other one is going to be deeply impacted by it.
Yes, absolutely. I was thinking specifically of this client I had recently who is an amazing artist, and his work is profoundly spiritual. Like I'm not an expert in art, but when I look at this person's art, I'm affected by it myself. So I know, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And, his thing was, I have a lot of haters out there who are like, how dare you put this out in this way and do this and do that. And, all of those things. And you're absolutely right. The thing that was holding him back was that he was taking that stuff on. And especially if anything you do involves stepping out into the public eye, there's going to be that noise on it. And my sort of my take on it was, well, do you think what you have to share is more important, impactful, and loving to the world than what the haters have to share with you? Than the haters shutting you down. Yeah. Do you think the haters shutting you down is more important than you sharing this profound art with the world? And it sort of, I think it like clicked in at that point, and like he realized that like, this is what I'm here to do. This is my purpose, is to share this stuff, and the way that I do that is with art, kind of thing. And that's not to say necessarily that anybody's true purpose has to be stepping into the public eye, right? It could be anything.
Exactly. So for some people, the acceptance that they have to come to, maybe their ego has been very fixated on that's the only way to make a difference, mm-hmm. right? And their process is to find out that it's not that, right? That they're more seemingly behind the scenes, and that has the exact same value. Yeah. So what you said about the person taking on, I think is the way you put it, what was coming from the haters. When that happens, what's going on is what they're saying has a resonance with what's unresolved in him. So for everybody, regardless of whether it looks like what's going on is internal, is external, it's coming from society, it's coming from a loved one, it's coming from a family member, any of that, the exploration is to go deeply to the root of what interacts with that and resolve it. Because once that's fully resolved, then it completely changes.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter anymore. And I'm thinking of, my daughters, when they were little, they would come home from school and they would be upset. And somebody said, "Oh, you're stupid," or something along those lines. And they would be upset about that. And I said, "Well, are you stupid? Is that a true thing?" And they're like, "No." And I would say, "Well, why are you upset that somebody?" And I understand. And I did understand that, social approval is really important at those ages. But I was trying to point out the sort of the folly of the situation. I said, "Are you a chair?" And my daughter would say, "No, I'm not a chair." So if I called you a chair, would that make you upset? Because it's not true about you, right? And they would go, "Oh, okay." And then it would sort of click. And I knew that it was about sort of pure disapproval. However, I wanted them to see the folly of the folly of that, of somebody calling you something and not hopefully taking that on board, especially at an early age, where it's going to creep up later in life, where the more you sort of buy into these messages that you are somehow broken or.
Exactly, because that's what it comes down to, right? It comes down to that awareness of love, right? And that awareness of your own access to love in any moment. So the reason she had a different reaction to someone calling her stupid and I'll just speak generally here, sure. Right? Because I don't know her experience in particular, that generally someone has a reaction to someone calling them stupid versus someone calling them a chair, is that there's no judgment about, well, that if I'm a chair, I then won't have access to love, right? There's judgment about if I am stupid, I won't have access to love. So your whole system is on guard against having any identity that is on the list of, if you're this, you don't have access to love, right? So even though she knew, as you helped point out to her, she rationally knew she wasn't stupid, that part underneath that's looking to always protect her and be on guard for her and try to make sure she has access to love said, "Oh, wait a minute, what? Stupid? Stupid's on the list of, if I'm that identity, I won't have access to love anymore." And of course, there's not going to be the same reaction for a chair because we don't have that kind of a judgment against it, right? So ultimately, that's what's going on so deeply with people just across the board, whether about in relation to that willingness to step out in their purpose or just the seemingly smallest day-to-day, moment-to-moment interactions with people, is there's this whole system that's built around protecting you to say, do I make sure that you're this certain identity to ensure that you'll have access to love? Yes,
that is, I think that's, for me, that's the point of the day right there, right? It's that, I need to fit myself into this mold that equals deserving of love in order to have access to that.
Or even that concept of being deserving of love, right? is inherently part of that whole system, because remember, love just loves. There's no deserving it. There's no earning it. There's no being worthy of it. There's none of that. And so even all of that is just built from this place of that initial agony, that initial belief that says that we're somehow separate from it. And so it builds up all of these crazy ideas about, well, how do I get back to it? Well, I'll earn it. I'll deserve it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I borrowed a practice, I think, from Eckhart Tolle, and it's been an important part of just my personal practice on a daily basis. And of course, COVID has really changed how many people I interact with on a regular daily basis. And I'm an incredibly social person, so I hopefully, fingers crossed we get through this soon. But as I'm out and about with people, I'm interacting with somebody at a grocery store, for example, they're ringing up my groceries or something. I make an effort to give that person at least a few moments of just absolute presence, right? And recognize just, whether it's eye contact or through words, or just hold the feeling in my heart that this is a human being, and, this is a human being, and I need to give them, there's that word deserving. Just from the fact that they exist, they deserve my presence and my love, and it's something that I've tried to instill in students and my children and that sort of thing. And I don't know how much of a difference it makes in the lives of the people I interact with, but it makes a big difference in my life, right? Because ultimately, they're people I interact with are reflections of me, and if I treat them. If I treat everybody I interact with as equally deserving of love, that I'm included in that circle, right? I'm included in the circle of compassion and love. Like, I deserve that too, because it is my norm that every being that exists is equally deserving of existing in love.
Yeah, and that they do, right? And so what happens when you decide to step into operating that way, like you just described, for you to be completely open and present to offer that to your interaction, it means that you're completely open and present.
Right.
Which, So a question I often give to people, and I think, I'm not sure if I gave you this link for, it's a little, I don't know if you call it a meditation or what, but it all hinges on the question, does love love this? Mm-hmm. And it's not even about getting a yes or no or any other answer. It's just using that question as an opening to let love show you.
I want to say I love that. I do love that, and I love inquiry as a form of spiritual practice, and I think that I'm gonna give that a try, because that sounds definitely.
Well, and it's just so simple. It's something people have reported back to me that they if they carry it through their lives. And it applies to everything. So what you would call external and even what you would call internal. So if somebody has had a big judgment about their own grief or their own fear and been long on a spiritual path to, purge themselves of all of that or whatever, right, and get rid of it all, it brings a completely different curiosity to, okay, so my frustration arises, my fear arises, my grief arises. Does love love it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you find out, right? Or it's a situation you're presented with. Does love love this? Or an aspect of yourself. For some people, they look in the mirror and they don't like what they see. And the question is, does love love this? Or there's some aspect of their identity that they don't like, or a behavior or a habit they've been fighting up, down, and sideways to, quote, get enough motivation and willpower to break, which never works, right, not in a sustainable, lasting way. And so that's the question. Does love love this? And does love love me even when I'm in the midst of this?
I think
because ultimately, right, the reason they want to break the habit is because they think the habit gives them a certain identity. And if they have the break it, then they're going to have a different identity that they've judged as has more access to love. All right. So it always just comes back through that thread.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm just from talking to you, I'm feeling more open, and I'm feeling, just pondering the question in my brain. So I think first I want to thank you for that question, that practice of inquiry. I think that's beautiful. Does love this? I am gonna practice that. I'm gonna take that on. Challenge accepted, I guess, if it's a challenge.
Well, like I said, it's about that light, easy, gentle curiosity that's really fun and becomes really joyful and just takes on a life of its own. And it's about the depths of what reveals itself to you when you do that. And at the same time, if your mind is going to be occupied and busy with something, let it have a question like that. So, and that's by the way, another thing that people get very locked up in that I see over and over again is the battle against the mind, the battle against the ego. And most people's minds need there's a bit of making up to do and bringing flowers and reconciliation because they've been in such battle, right? How often do you hear somebody, oh, my mind just trips me up. My mind ruins it for me. My mind won't shut up. Right. And they've been trying to silence it and shut it down. And is there a silence and like you said before, that total stillness that's available for us? Yes. But it doesn't care about if the mind is making noise or not.
Right.
So the mind doesn't have to be like shot down and destroyed. It has to be embraced and loved and understood for what its purpose actually is and be allowed to fulfill that purpose in an appreciated way. And then when that's what it has, when it's completely loved and appreciated and acknowledged for what it does know how to do, then it doesn't take on these extra burdens of, I'm meant to protect you and organize your whole life and answer all the big questions for you, which of course
right.
It isn't capable of, right? So then it gets quiet on its own because its noise was really just motivated by these underlying things.
It's interesting that you mentioned when I sometimes I teach meditation, and the number one thing I get is I can't meditate because I can't stop my thoughts. And my answer to that is, congratulations, you're alive. And I guess I'm sorry that you're not the Buddha yet. But they'll quiet on their own. You don't. But
if you look through even that story, right, as an example of the Buddha, he didn't get there by force. No one gets there by force.
Right.
No one gets there by control, manipulation, more of the same old.
Turning the crank and making it tighter and I'm going to push those thoughts out of my head really hard.
Which is a thought.
It's a thought and it doesn't work. It's
yeah.
And the thing is, it's meant, in my experience, there is a resting in beingness, a resting in love. There's that happens, and you start to like stuff like that. I can't stop my thoughts stops to matter, and then they quiet down on their own. But it stops, and it is about this concept, how things should be, right? This is how it should be. This is how it's supposed to be.
Expectation is the number one obstacle.
Yeah. That's that'll be my next project, how to figure out how to get people to let go of expectation. That'll definitely
it's just the same as everything else, right? You acknowledge that the expectation is there, and you get really curious about what the root of it is, right? And why you're attached to it. And somewhere down along that line, you'll find that there's the idea that I have to have this expectation because of the judgments I have about what will give me access to love and won't give me access to love.
Well, absolutely fantastic. I feel like I could talk to you for 10 more hours just on this topic alone, but I feel like I don't feel like we're, my external reality tells me that it's time to wrap up. It's been really fantastic, and I want to thank you for coming on. And I know that I have gotten a lot out of this conversation. If my listeners were to want to contact you and find out more about what you've got going on, I will add links in the show notes and that sort of thing. But how would I find out more about you? Were I so inclined?
Yeah, well, you can just turn up to my website, which is RebeccaQuave.com. I do have an account on Instagram and on Facebook that you could search me. Those are not, it's they're intermittently active. So if you expect to be flooded with influencer style continuous posting or something, that's not what you'll find there. If you're okay with sort of a flow of things arising when they arise, then it'll be fine.
Nice. And do you have a mailing list on your website if I wanted to sign up for a mailing list of some sort?
Yeah, for sure. So right on my homepage, you'll see the Does Love Love This ebook right on the homepage, and there's a little form that you could put in and that'll connect you to what I call love notes, where again, it's just intermittently sent out reminders, and if there's announcements about whatever's going on. And then there's also, I think I gave you the link for it's a little more in depth, which is the Truth About Love, sort of 3-part gift.
So I will definitely add all of those links to the show notes. Thank you so much again for coming on. This has been lovely and enlightening, and hopefully we can talk again sometime soon.
You're so welcome. It's been a real delight, and I would absolutely love to. Just let me know.
Fantastic. And here's our outro.
You have been listening to Speaking Spirit with your host, John Moore. For more info or to contact John, go to mainshaman.com. That's maineshaman.com.